Y'all, it's JJK break week, but fear not because we are going to battle those lobotomy Kaisen blues by talking about the most underrated MC, Yuji Itadori. I've gotten several questions about him, which makes sense considering where we left off in the recent chapter, so we're going to dive into it. But manga spoilers beware, if you're not caught up, you may want to skip this one. All right, so first up, we got a couple of questions from Munch Crunch, and the first one is, could you do a video going over Yuji's progression and feats up until this point in the manga? And I actually did a video a couple months ago that is basically that, where I talk about what Yuji's done and what his potential is leading into the end of the series. So I'm going to reply that video to your comment here, and I will also link it down in the pinned comments for anybody watching on YouTube. And if you're watching on TikTok, it's one of my pinned videos there as well. So definitely check that out. But then Munch Crunch's second comment is, do all of Yuji's attacks hurt people's souls, or is he basically able to control it and he's choosing to do that against Sukuna here? So I would say kind of the answer is both. We don't really have enough information to know for sure how these soul attacks work, only that ever since, his body housed both his own and Sukuna's soul, Yuji could perceive the soul. So it does make it seem like it is like an extra layer that's happening, meaning Yuji could probably punch somebody without hurting their soul if he didn't want to, but it easily could also just be a passive effect to his attacks now. I will say that whatever the case, I do feel like what he's doing against Sukuna is taking it to like a whole other level. Now, whether that's some sort of other ability at play, the soul swapping, for example, we're going to talk more about that with a later question, or if it's just his passive ability to damage the soul, I don't know, but I think there's something a little special going on. Anyway, to answer your question, I think he can control it to some extent. Next up, we have this absolutely insane donation from Kaun. Thank you so much for the generosity, man. You're a legend. And he wants to know, how did Yuji know that Megami was giving up inside of Sukuna? And great question. So this is exactly what I was alluding to in the previous question, where I was talking about there's seemingly some levels to what Yuji can do with his soul punches, if we want to call it that, right? Because clearly we're going beyond just perceiving the soul and damaging it when Yuji straight up enters an innate domain and directly interfaces with Megami. Now, there's still so much of a question mark here. We don't have the full picture, so it's hard to draw any concrete conclusions because Yuji didn't just like straight up disappear, because we know moments after this he gets slashed by the attacks Sukuna sends out, right? So like Yuji's spirit or soul or whatever we want to call it, I think is interfacing with Megami here, but not like literally Yuji. Like Yuji's physical body still existed in the real world whilst this was happening. So is this just an evolution of his perception of the soul? Like, is he perceiving it so well, let's call it, that he is literally seeing Megami inside of Sukuna's it's not Sukuna's body, it's Megami's body, but you know what I mean. Like, he's perceiving the soul so well that he's seeing Megami inside of the innate domain. And maybe this is just like artistic representation of that. Maybe, or maybe it has something to do with Yuji's seeming ability to soul swap, like with that Kusakabe panel, right? So I definitely think this is something unique to Yuji. Now, whether it's directly related to the perception of the soul, the ability he got from sharing a body with Sukuna, or if it's something else, like there's some other spark at play here, that's what we don't know. We don't have enough information. But whatever the case may be, to simply answer your question, he knew this because he's able to see inside the innate domain. What's interesting is the only thing I could even remotely compare this to is what Sukuna does when he converses with people before sending them to the afterlife, right? Both with Jogo in Shibuya and Kashimo after he defeats him. These scenes aren't taking place in reality. Like, this isn't in Shibuya, it's in a white void, and this clearly isn't in Shinjuku. So is what Sukuna is doing here similar to what Yuji is doing with Megami? Maybe they're not related at all, but it's an interesting parallel at least. Next up, we got this question from Yatlord about Yuji's hypothetical domain. Y'all feel free to pause and read the full comment if you'd like, but it's basically asking, could Yuji's domain be like an opposite of Sukuna's? And maybe since Sukuna's, cuts people down with these slashes, could Yuji's have some more peaceful type of effect? And as you can see from this art I found online, this is an idea that's been floating around for a while. Like, what if Yuji has Benevolent Shrine as his domain to contrast with Malevolent Shrine? And I think this is a really cool idea, and it's possible, especially considering Yuji may have Sukuna's technique of Shrine. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, check my video I put out a couple days ago where I talk about Sukuna's true curse technique. But if, he does have that, then it would stand to reason that his domain could be similar to Sukuna's. But the thing to remember about domains is one, they are a manifestation of your innate domain, your soul, right? You are bringing that into reality. That's why people's domains look the way they do. It's not just because of the curse technique imbued into it, it's a reflection of you, right? So Yuji's should be different from Sukuna's in that regard, although if they are twins, then they may have very similar innate domains, right? But then the important thing to remember is that the domain is imbued with a curse technique, right? That's why Sukuna's rains down slashes, because he imbued it with cleave and dismantle. So even if Yuji does have shrine as the curse technique, what its effect is going to depend on which technique he imbues into the barrier. So we know he has blood manipulation right now. He may have other things, and he may even get more things before the series ends, right? So if he were to have a peaceful domain effect, if we want to call it that generically, then it would mean he had to imbue his domain with that effect. So he would need like a peaceful curse technique, if you will. Continuing on the domain trend, we have this question from Dylan, who asks if Yuji could possibly open a domain now and use Black Flash constantly. So, I just explained kind of how the domain works. So whether or not Yuji can do it now, especially since he just awakened, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I do think by end of series, we will see a Yuji domain, and it could be next chapter for all I know, right? But as far as being able to use Black Flash on command, I don't think that would necessarily be a function of his domain, again, because, the domain effect depends on what curse technique you can imbue into it. And as we understand it, Black Flash isn't a curse technique, right? So I don't think that would be the effect of the domain, but Yuji's awakening or, some power up Yuji may give him the ability to do Black Flashes at will. That's supposed to be impossible, but, Yuji is built different. He's the man chosen by the Black Sparks. So I would put that on the table. But what I'll say is that I don't think it would be a factor of his domain necessarily. But, who knows? And continuing right on that train, we got this comment from Dip, who says that Yuji's awakening could be him understanding cursed energy enough to do Black Flash at will. And I certainly think that's on the table, right? This idea has been out there that Yuji will be the one to command Black Flash. And again, chosen by the Black Sparks, I could easily see it. Black Flash has been all throughout Yuji's narrative, so it would make sense. Now, whether that means he will literally be able to do it at will, or if he's just going to be like the Black Flash savant, and he can't necessarily do it at will, but he's popping them off all the time, we're going to have to see. And continuing with the Black Flashes, we have this question from Rashad on if a Black Flash could bypass Infinity. And no, it can't. It is a very powerful attack, but it still wouldn't be able to do anything against Infinity. The only way to bypass Infinity is with domain amplification. So theoretically, if you had a domain amplification Black Flash strike, then that would work, but a Black Flash on its own will not get past Infinity. And then before we hop off the Black Flash train, we got this question from Wyman, which talks about Yuji's Divergent Fist, where he basically lags behind the cursed energy to strike after his physical strike, right? He's asking if he could make that even greater and basically store up attacks to turn them into Black Flashes, thus technically doing a Black Flash at will. So I don't think it would happen this way because Black Flash is literally all about the timing. It's all about that 0.000001 second application of cursed energy. So Divergent Fist is a lag that is longer than that, even at its shortest, if that makes sense. So you wouldn't be able to turn a Divergent Fist strike into a Black Flash, because kind of what a Black Flash is like the fastest possible Divergent Fist strike, if that makes sense. And finally, we got two questions from I'm Gaming. The first one is about Divergent Fist, and he wants to know when Yuji exclaims Divergent Fist, is he making it more powerful via revealing one's hand? That being the binding vow where you explain your curse technique to somebody and it gets more powerful. So no, simply just like saying the title of an attack wouldn't be enough information for revealing one's hand to work. But theoretically, I could see Yuji using revealing one's hand on Divergent Fist by explaining what he's doing, like the cursed energy strike lagging behind the physical strike. That might work, but simply saying epic punch on a normal punch wouldn't empower it. And then to answer your second question down here, y'all feel free to pause, read the whole thing, but blood manipulation is the curse technique. Piercing blood is just one facet of it. So Choso doesn't have several blood curse techniques. It's all just blood manipulation. Same thing with Megami. Each Shikigami isn't its own curse technique. They are all just elements of the 10 Shadows. Sukuna is a bit more confusing because we don't know. And again, I direct you to look at my Sukuna curse technique video from a couple days ago to get a little bit more clarity there. That's going to do it for this one, y'all. Thank you to everyone who donated, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon.